Festival of Wonder. It's a bit of a mouthful, so I'm going to, from this point on, refer to it as the Wonder Fest. No problem, Mr. Sergeta. The festival itself looks like it starts on the 25th. Fitting for the holiday season. But honestly, the festival starts 3 days earlier, which is on the 23rd at midnight Pacific United States time, which is this line right here, PST. Because that is when the first lucky draw starts. And, you know, we get 3 lucky draws every single festival when it comes around. And this time we got... we don't even know yet. Thanks, gentlemen. Thank you. We don't really know. We just have... we feel like we have a pretty good idea. And on the first banner in the lucky draw is most likely healer. The stuff that heals. Super Soul Breaks, Burst Soul Breaks, and USBs and everything. The whole shebang. Which makes it a pretty poor banner for just about everybody. Except for the newest players. That actually still need stuff like the Super Soul Breaks. And possibly if you're like really starved on Realm Synergy and you need some of this stuff to complete the Torment D300 Sid missions, because those are still valuable. Since they yield 5-star motes, which is one of the most valuable currencies in the game. You can consider some Super Soul Breaks to be effective if they're good for you there. And really you just need to evaluate the banner personally. But if you don't want to, if you want to be lazy about it, that's okay. Just know that it's probably not a good draw. Even at 25 Mithril, it's a pretty poor banner. Because of the sheer number of Super Soul Breaks and poor Burst Soul Breaks that outweigh the good stuff. The second of those luckies is a Burst Soul Break lucky. And if it really is what it says it is, which is just Burst Soul Breaks, then it's a pretty poor banner. Because there aren't that many good Burst Soul Breaks anymore, like that are worth throwing Mithril at. Because you can get those at any time you want on these festival banners. There's tons of them on these festival banners. Because there's 6 slots taken up by non-BSBs, which leaves 8 Burst Soul Breaks on every single one of these banners. That's a lot. You can get these whenever you want, and that's why pulling for them in a large pool, so you're not targeting specific Burst Soul Breaks, is just going to land you with stuff you're going to be disappointed with. And yeah, it's half price, but half the disappointment is still disappointment. The last lucky is most likely going to be every 6-star relic in the game, which I can't talk down. That's a good banner. I'm fairly certain everyone's going to be pulling on that one. I certainly will, and yeah, if you want to be lazy about it and not look at the lists, don't worry about it. You can probably pull and feel at least good about what you spent. Like you may get Lon's OSB, okay? But the chances of you getting something just bad and not worth the 25 Mithril you spent is very low. And that's what makes it a good draw. So those will start before the 25th. Those will start before the festival. And that's like the lead up. It's the red carpet. And now that we've walked down the carpet, let's get to what everyone really wants to get to, and the 5 phases of relic banners that we get that always span 2 days each. The first one starts at 5 p.m. on the 25th, and lasts 2 days until the next one, 27th, 29th, 31st, and the last one on January 2nd. Yes, Don, the actual banners have leaked. So without further ado, let's get into it. Oh, first, before I get into any of that, I want to just give a shout out to El Nino and Enlier from Reddit. I mean, they enable us to see all of this information and actually just look at it and think about it and talk about it. So, you know, it's really important to understand where this stuff came from and to offer credit where it's due. Hello, Shadow Dusk. Okay, yeah, this morning was fun, screaming hysterics. You know, when you wake up and you see people screaming about this on Discord, it makes for a fun morning. All right, so December 25th, first banner. Let's go take a look at it. Well, first here we see I just told you about the composition. It's 4 6-stars on each banner, 8 burst soul breaks on each banner, and only 2 LMR. Good or bad, depending on how you look at it. Personally, I think bad. I think LMR have much more impact on the game at the moment than BSBs, and I would prefer that this section were larger, that matched up better with the characters that come on this section. You see we have Locke, Creel, Refia, and Locke again on the top end of Banner 1. Seeing Locke and Creel's excellent LMRs on the bottom of the banner means that this is great stuff. And I would just prefer that, you know, 2 more slots. That's all I ask. That helps kind of support the rest of the banner. Refia's LMR would have been nice. And, you know, we have Locke twice up here, so let's give an LMR to Papalimo or something. That would be nice. VV. I don't know. But it'd be better than some of these burst soul breaks like Scott and Braska. They're just more impactful on the game. But let's go take a look at the banner itself. Alright. For the 4 6-stars on the first banner, we see that this is a pure fire theme, which actually makes it pretty easy to evaluate. You know whether you need fire relics or not, and it makes it easy for us to look into the future and look at what banners are good on fire damage and how they compare to this one. But for this banner itself, this is the only banner that I can think of that has two chains of the same element on it. 2 chains of the fire element. And first off, we have Locke's CSB. And the second one is Creel's CSB. We'll go take a look at those right now. They're wonderful relics to evaluate because they're just so simple and so powerful. We'll do Locke first because he shows up first. Atomic Dive. It's 11 single attacks at 0.72 each. Defense and resistance minus 50% for 25 seconds, and fire chain plus 20%. Chains are going to be good in any situation in the game because it's Final Fantasy and it's going to be elementally focused no matter what. But the current draw of our elemental teams it's Magicite Dungeons, right? And with the 80% debuff effectiveness reduction, it makes Locke have one of the worst chains in the game. But that's a misleading thing to say because it's still a chain. And at the end of the day, what really matters is that fire chain plus 20%, which means you start out by doing plus 20% damage for all fire damage, plus 20% right off the bat. And then since it's 11 single attacks, it starts adding to the chain, and it adds more damage on top of that. So the chain is going to start out at 11. So you're going to be doing, I think it's an additive bonus, so plus 33% damage. And then every time a fire attack happens during the course of the fight, well, during the course of this status, which lasts 15 seconds. It adds one more, and it keeps building and building and building. And it's really easy to just overpower elemental attacks from that point forward. And that's what makes chains so ridiculously powerful. Because nothing else in the game really, besides, you know, stat buffs underneath soft cap, nothing else in the game really boosts damage potential as much as this. You can turn some of the worst stuff in the game into something, you know, doing a hell of a lot of damage just with a chain. So getting these is pretty important. Well, not important. More like it sets you up. It sets you up better than most elemental relics. And seeing two of these chains on the same banner for the same relic means that this is... it's unlikely that there are going to be better fire banners in the future. But there is one we can at least compare it to. Anyway, that was Locks, and yeah, it's not one of the better chains, but it's still a chain. Creel, on the other hand, is a little different. Creel's chain is one of the best. 11 single attacks, fire chain, just like Locks. This is going to be a recurring theme. 11 attacks to build the chain to 11, fire chain status, and then an added effect. Creel's is grants quick cast 2 to all allies. Is just... That's such a silly status to provide to your entire party when you're casting the chain, which is probably going to be at about, you know, 10, 12 seconds into the fight. I'm sorry, I shouldn't talk as though every single fight in the game is Magicite. It's on my mind. But the thing about quick cast and insta cast is it doesn't matter what stage of the game you're in, whether it's the lowest stuff or the highest stuff. Doing things faster is always good for everybody. The only time it's not good is if you already have these statuses and you're already attacking really fast. But there's no bad time to be doing things very quickly. If you're in a fight where debuffs were effective, if you're doing things quickly, that means you can add more debuffs before, you know, one falls off. You know, it's... So much of this game is about timing and buffs. And by doing things quicker, you're getting so much more effectiveness out of everybody in the entire party, and that's why these quick cast 2 to all ally chains are the best there is. Bar none, in my opinion. I would say that they're even better than Zax, but Zax is a little weird. So I guess I can't really compare it. Okay, so those are your two chains on top of the banner, and they're both good because they're chains. And one of them is one of the best in the game in Creel's. The next two 6-stars, we'll go over Locke's OSB first because it's just an OSB. Locke's Gladius is one of those weak OSBs along with Bart's. The problem with Locke's is Bart's at least does 4 elements worth of damage, even though it's a low 10.0 multiplier on his OSB. Locke, who is basically been turned into a fire character. He's not multi-elemental. Okay, he can do holy if you really, really need it, but he's not good at it. Like Bart's is good at all of his elements. Locke is a fire character, and for him to be saddled with an OSB penalized for being multi-elemental is pretty unfortunate. It's a fire and holy OSB. With a lower multiplier than just about every other OSB in the game. I think the defining good characteristic of this relic used to be that it's a plus holy dagger, which I'm pretty sure is still unique. There's one other. I forget who it belongs to. I think it's Rem. Rem's OSB is a plus holy dagger, but it's a magical dagger. Yeah, but his UOSB is not this OSB. But with how common holy relics are now, and how, and back in the day, what made this so good was that there were very, very few 6-star daggers in the game. So this had a pretty large amount of attack for a dagger, which could be used by many, many people. But there's more 6-star daggers in the game now, so it's less uncommon. So it's actually not that great of a pickup, but it is. And I suppose the same thing applies to Bart's OSB whenever I talk about it and about wanting it, because, you know, personally I would. It's still an OSB. There's nothing Locke can do that matches a 10.0 multiplier. It's weak, but it's still stronger than anything else he can do. His CSB, for example, which is on this banner, is a very high multiplier, by the way, at a 7.92. But the problem with his CSB, and what's nice about his OSB being on this banner, is that when you recast a chain, or chain soul break, CSB, you remove the chain, and the chain itself doesn't gain access to the previous chain. So but by using his OSB while the chain is active, it does get the plus damage from the currently active chain. So having his OSB is actually kind of nice. And it is also nice that it is a 1.2 cast time rather than a 2.5. Because, again, that is like having a quick cast active. Again, doing things quickly is never going to be a bad thing. So it does make up a little bit for it being a 10.0 multiplier. And lastly, in the 6 stars, we have Refia's Metal Knuckles. That is her USB. Burning Devotion. 10 single attacks, 0.71 each. Grants attach fire, critical damage plus 50%, quick cast, and fire quick cycle. We've seen this USB many times before. Quick cycle is a very common thing, or a status to see on USBs. As long as she uses a fire attack, she will grant herself quick cast every single time. So it's a rapid fire USB. You cast it, you give yourself quick cast 1, you use a fire attack, you grant yourself quick cast 1, you just keep on going. The fact that this has critical damage plus 50% rather than another thing. Well, let's look at a comparable USB. Look at Refia's Attach Fire. Crit damage plus 50%, quick cast 1, fire quick cycle. The first one that comes to mind that's very similar would be Balthier. Balthier's USB, which is coming out in a couple days, is Attach Fire, quick cast 1, and Machinist quick cycle 2. This is a pretty bad comparison. I didn't... Machinist quick cycle 2, what is that? What is the difference between Quick Cycle 1 and Quick Cycle 2? Grant Quick Cast 1 after using Machinist ability. Grant Quick Cast 1 after using a Machinist ability. Okay. Well, I'm glad I got distracted by that. Anyways, Balthier's USB is very similar to Refia's. There's a pretty big difference here is, well, two differences. One, Balthier is limited to Machinists to activate his quick cast. Refia is not. It's a fire quick cycle. So anything that does fire damage activates the quick cast. And that includes soul breaks. Balthier does not, because soul breaks don't have ability schools, and you need an ability school to be able to have the machinist trait. And another is the critical damage plus 50%. The critical damage plus 50% is a weird addition to this burst, or to this USB, because it's not natively active by her. She has no way to give herself crit rate, other than through her burst soul break. So you would have to use these two together in order for you to get that, or get it from an external source. The most popular would probably be Eiko and her burst soul break, which gives crit rate 50% to the entire party, and or more popular very soon, within a month, Onion Knight and his USB 2, which grants Heiska attack plus 50% and crit rate 50% to the entire party. It's as broken as it sounds. So without those, crit damage plus 50% doesn't do anything, because what it does is exactly what it describes. Is it increased the amount of damage you do on criticals by 50%. And no one in the game has a very high native crit rate. It's absolutely in the single digits, which means that this 50% increase of damage is just a non-factor. Is this a good USB? Yes. Yeah, it is, because Refi is really good. But this is going to be something I talk about a lot on this banner. Fire is the most populated element in the entire game. So in order to be at the top, the highest tier of dealing fire damage, you need to be really, 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 really good, because there's some amazing fire damage dealers in this game. Refia, in my opinion, barely makes the cut. There's better fire monks than her. There's better fire physical damage dealers than her. There's better magical fire damage dealers than her. But Refia herself is a very good character. Does gain or have access to a 25% dual cast LMR, which allows her to do some pretty crazy things. Fires Within is an awesome monk ability, and that's the one you're supposed to pair with this USB. And it is good, and it is worth having, and it is probably going to contribute a hell of a lot of damage to any physical fire team that you create, and probably hybrid as well. She's less good on a hybrid team as most people, though. Who's a good example of that? Notice another thing. It's like another comparison, like how I did with Balthier. Attach Fire, the Quick Cast 1, and the Quick Cycle. And what I'm looking at here is the crit damage plus 50%. And I believe Sabin. Here's a trait you're going to see on a lot of USBs, is that they get their stuff, and then they get a buff. Refia's is critical damage plus 50%. Sabin's is attack and resistance plus 30% to the user for 25 seconds. I would personally rate that higher, because you don't need crit rate for that to be effective, and it allows him to be better on a hybrid team. So that's just an example of a better fire monk than Refia. Refia is still really good, but there's a lot of fire damage in this game that's better than her. But it's still a good thing to have on the banner. And I'm sorry it took me so long on that. This is going to be very similar to most of the analysis that I do, is that the first banner is going to take longer than others as I set up, like talking about the common traits of USBs, what chains are, and stuff like that. So there's our top end on the banner, and that's what these banners are going to be defined by. Burst Soul Breaks are still useful in the game, especially for newer characters, because they remove the need to go to spend a lot of orbs on honing. But you should be working towards getting those orbs so you can hone them. or abilities, because 5-star abilities are better now. As of the ability overhaul that we just recently received. 5-star abilities exceed the potential of what most of these bursts can do. Turning these bursts, because none of their commands is good anymore, or well, some are. Some are actually fine. And that's what I'm probably going to be going over inside all of these burst soul break sections, is which of these bursts stands out above and beyond 5-star abilities. And with the new the dailies that we received last night, it's easier than ever to get 5-star orbs. So honing 5-star abilities is like a real thing for a lot of people now. So I'm going to focus on burst soul breaks, and there's a lot of them, 8 on every banner. Which ones are still good and make the banners good, because it's an important thing. But beyond the burst soul breaks, which are a very small part of banners from now on, a lot of banners all 5 of these banners are going to be defined by these 4 relics, which is the 4 6 stars. And on this banner, I see Locke's OSB, which is okay. It's okay because Locke's chain is here, so I'm okay with it being here. But it's not exactly the most, glowing endorsement. The most contentious thing on this banner is Refia's USB. Not because it's bad, because it's not. It's really, really quite powerful. The contentious thing is that it appears on a hype banner, like Hype of the Ages banner, that's going to be dropping within a month. And it's not a particularly special relic. It's just a 6-star fist weapon. And on that banner is, like, I subscribe and I endorse the hype of that banner that's going to be happening in a month. That's the Onion Knight banner. I talked about his USB 2 and being broken and, assisting Refia because it provides crit rate to the party. Well, that's on there, and so is his USB 1, and so is his Legend Materia, and so is Refia's Legend Materia. And so is a lot of other good stuff, too. That's a hype banner, and a lot of people are going to be pulling on that. And I feel like that's a big conflict with this banner. It kind of alienates the 2 chains. Because I don't want Locke's OSB anymore if I don't have anything that makes Locke good. Because just having his OSB doesn't make him worth using. If I'm asking for his OSB, that means I have his chain, because then there's a reason to use him, and then I can use the OSB, at the end of the fight to do a lot of damage, in addition to, what the chain has added. So this is a conditional relic. And this has a major conflict. So the big thing about this banner, and it is big, it's absolutely big, is that there are 2 fire chains on the banner. That's something that we're probably just never going to see again. Well, until at least 6 months into the future, which is a long time for a gacha game. Already almost 3 years into its life cycle. That's a long time. So, though these 2 6 stars have some cracks in their value, these 2 do not. Especially Creel's, which is, in my opinion, one of the best relics in the entire game. Because that chain is just gross, and I personally believe the best fire damage dealers in the game are mages as well, with Vivi and Terra. So they go together really well with her. That's what I have to say about the top. Let's see if there's anything happening below there, starting at Papalymo's Lilith Rod, that gives us any more reason to pull on this banner. First off, we have Papalymo's Lilith Rod, which is a plus fire damage rod. It's a burst soul break. It is one of the burst soul breaks that survives the ability Apocalypse. Because Chain Faraga would be the ability of choice, or Meltdown, the ability of choice for Papalymo. Chain Faraga has an 11.8 multiplier. That's very high, and it's spread over 4 attacks. And that's very high now. That's what exceeds so many burst soul breaks. Papalymo's burst soul break is different. His is special. It is one of the only 3 in the game. I call him one of the Mage Triumvirate. Papalymo's first command, if you meet the right conditions, and they're not that hard to meet, is a 12.0 multiplier. And, you know, you can say, well, that's basically 11.8. There's very little difference between those two. And you could also raise the point that burst commands only generate 50 soul break points, which would again put, which would put Chain Faraga clearly on top. Because Chain Faraga generates 70. But the key is that it's done over 6 attacks instead of 4. Which means if you are using Chain Faraga and doing 40,000 damage, 9999, over all 4 attacks, that means there's damage that you're missing that's getting stopped by the cap that Papalymo doesn't worry about because he has all this damage spread over 6 attacks instead of 4. I would have given this burst a much better endorsement way back in the day, because Chain Faraga dealt 2 attacks, and you know you cap on that all day long. 6 attacks was just so much better than that. The difference has definitely narrowed. It's hard against some of the hardest content in the game to do more than 40,000 damage with the 12.0 multiplier, which means that the value of the 6 attacks is lessened. And if the value of the 6 attacks is lessened, that's the only thing that these commands have going for them. Because Chain Faraga does generate a lot more soul break points, and soul break points are the lifeblood of this game. So what that turns Papalymo's soul break, or burst soul break at that point, into is kind of a glorified super soul break. Enochian Faraja. 8 single attacks, 1.88 each. That is as high as it should be. Grants haste, attach fire, and burst mode to the user. The differences here between this and a super soul break is that it grants burst mode, which admittedly is nice. That's 25 or 20% increase to all stats that stacks with everything. That's really nice. But is that so nice that it's worth spending a lot of mithril on these days? I'd have to say, still, it's good. It's good to have. It's tough. I feel like Papalymo's going to get a USB eventually. And I don't really have much doubt in that this is actually going to work quite well with it. And having a legend dive Papalymo with, you know, multiple soul breaks of him, and, you know, end fire active from either his USB or both his USB and BSB is probably going to allow him to exceed that 40,000 damage cap, which makes his BSB valuable at that point. And it's a plus fire rod at the same time. It's still good. I think it's still a nice pickup if you don't have it. If you do have it, then it just turns into a dupe, which is okay. There are more fire relics in the game now. And there will be more coming in the future. So it's reducing the the value of 5-star relics, because they have a lower stat threshold than 6-star relics. It does reduce the value of it a little bit, but I still use my Lilith Rod right now for dealing fire damage with mages. So it's not a bad dupe either. So I would say that that's a pretty nice thing, and that's going to be rare. It's rare to find good burst soul breaks now, and that's one of them. Next up, we have ETA and her burst soul break. I'm not going to go into it too deeply. It's not good. It's a plus fire fist weapon. That's about the best thing I can say for it. It absolutely doesn't survive the ability Apocalypse. But it is a plus fire fist weapon, which may be valuable to you. That's up to you. Plus fire fist weapons are valuable. There is a 6-star plus fire fist weapon in the game. It is Zell's USB. It's unfortunate that this isn't Zell's USB, because that's an awesome relic, and that's something that doesn't have a conflict on the Onion Knight banner. So I know there was a lot of gripe this morning on my Discord about that. But it is a decent relic, and if that has value to you, then that's more value out of a BSB slot that you're probably not going to find many other places. Next up, we have Refia's Burst Soul Break, which is still one of the good Burst Soul Breaks in the game for a single reason. It's... I haven't brought up item allowance yet, but take Papalimo's Burst Soul Break. I just described it. It grants haste, burst mode, and attach fire, and does damage. That is the typical item allowance for a Burst Soul Break. Refia's BSB, along with a couple others in the game, break the item allowance cap for Burst Soul Breaks. Refia's BSB, Dance of Carnage, grants haste, Dance of Carnage, attach fire, and burst mode to the user. Notice there's an extra effect in here, because on Papalimo's we saw attacks, haste, attach fire, and burst mode. Dance of Carnage is effectively free, which turns this into like a pseudo USB, and that's what made it one of the best burst soul breaks in the game for a very long time. It is definitely at its value impacted, because the commands aren't all that hot anymore. The second command isn't bad because it's a self buff, and that's always going to have value. But the first command was always its shining beacon. The first command no longer is better than 5-star abilities, unfortunately. It's still good for a command, but that's all I can say for it. But the entry to this Burst Soul Break is still valuable because of that Dance of Carnage. Dance of Carnage is a status that just sets your crit rate to 50%. And if we're going over that Refia USB that we just saw on the 6-star section of the banner, her having crit rate is a very nice thing. So that both of these together would turn Refia into someone worthy of entrusting to, because whenever you're looking at 2 soul breaks that need to be used in order for a character to let's say activate themselves, to be very powerful, to contend with the highest tiers in the game, which I believe Refia does with both of these together. Those 2 soul breaks together probably require entrusting, because it's very hard to generate that much soul break points by yourself without getting outside help. And if you choose to use something like an Ace Striker RM or the Battleforged RM, then you're losing out on dealing damage, and that's the drawback of its own. So it is a drawback that Refia is at her best when she's using both of these together. Her BSB, though, is still very good. It's very good by itself. It is a plus fire armor. It's honestly nice so far that we've gotten into the BSB section, and all 3 relics that we've gone over so far are plus elemental, and plus fire in this case, which is a really nice thing, for people looking for fire damage, and that's going to reflect very, very nicely on my final assessment of it. Refia's Burst Soul Break is still very potent by itself. Yes, the burst commands were kind of shoved down in effectiveness, but Fires Within is a 5-star fire monk ability, which got buffed more than a lot of the abilities in the game. It's a 3.4 multiplier, which is sufficiently high, ranged, and it heals the user for 20% of their max HP, which is a really, really nice thing in a lot of situations. Her having a pseudo USB Burst Soul Break and being able to self-buff herself with Command 2 and then use Fires Within, with that 50% crit rate offered by Dance of Carnage, makes her Burst Soul Breaks one of the more relevant Burst Soul Breaks still in the game, as well as being a nice piece of armor. You think it's 30% Paranoid Survivor? I do want to be sure of that, so I will ask. Or I will find out for sure. It's 30%, you're right. Even better. Fires Within is a very, very powerful 5-star ability. And that's what makes these 3 fire monks, Zell, Sabin, or 4, ETA. ETA's good, just not her BSB. And Refia. Those 4 monks are actually quite good because Fires Within is good. And that's going to be a common theme, is that the best abilities in the game are what enable some of the better characters in the game. So we've got Lilith Rod, Kaiser Knuckles, and Shura Gloves taken care of so far. That's a pretty nice lineup. Lilith Rod and Shura Gloves are good Burst Soul Breaks in a barren wasteland of bad Burst Soul Breaks. And all 3 of these are plus elemental relics. Rod, Fist Weapon, and Bracer. Next up, we have Creel's BSB. And now I think we find a dud. First, I want to double check. It is not plus elemental. And Creel's Burst Soul Break is one of the old guard. It was one of the first bursts in the attach element category. Tomorrow's Promise, 6 group attacks. So group attacks is already attacks. You'll notice that group multipliers, 11.94, are very, very different from single target multipliers. For instance, a very, very similar one, which also appears on this banner, Papalimo. Papalimo's burst is single target and 15.04. So the group attacks being 11.94 is a fairly significant tax on its entry. And then haste, attach, fire, burst mode. When you see these 3 together, normally it just means it's a super soul break with burst mode attached to it. And in this case, unlike Papalimo, it's true. I will go over this just once because Creel does have a very, very standard burst. And that she has an 8.68 multiplier on her first command. That is 4 attacks that do 8.68 and generate 50 soul break points. If you remember back to Chain Faraga is better in every single way. Generates more points, and it has a much higher multiplier than that. If there's any value to the burst, that she gains the ability to do a group attack, which may or may not be useful to you. I haven't, in my use of all these burst soul breaks in the game for, the past year, I haven't used group attacks all that often. They're not so useful that I would consider it, something that could turn a burst around. They're commonly on almost every single burst on the second command. If there's any that are useful, it's because they provide something else with them. Let's see Papalimos, for instance. Papalimo has a group attack command. That's, you know, same thing as Creel, but the big difference here is that it grants magic bargain to the user for 20 seconds. That's the good part about this command. You use this group command even versus a single target, because giving himself plus 30% magic and minus 30% defense is normally worth the turn because of how much damage it boosts him by. Yeah. So, yeah, I spent a lot more time on Creel's Burst Soul Break than I would have. I will in the future for others like it, because there are many like it. This is not good. This is a dead spot on the banner, whether it's a dupe or not. Next up is Vivi's Gravity Rod, which I believe is his Burst Soul Break 2, which means it's actually a good burst. It's kind of interesting that this banner has a fairly respectable Burst Soul Break section. Magic Fury. Low multiplier, but it probably pays this tax because of the area of effect and multi-elemental status. Fire, lightning, and ice. That's the good part. It's not the good part, that's a good thing to have because of the true nature of this burst. Magic and resistance plus 30% to all allies for 25 seconds. Instead of it giving him End Fire, a selfish one, and that's what kind of dooms most of these Burst Soul Breaks, this is to all allies, and it works versus 3 different elements. Already, we're off to a good start. That's... When you buff the entire party, that's the sign of a Burst Soul Break that's going to, weather the storm of, everything else that's fallen off the cliff. This one has not, because it's a tri-elemental entry, and it provides a magic buff to the entire party, which is very valuable to mage teams. The commands... if I remember correctly, are nothing to write home about. But that's okay. Because then all he needs to do is cast the burst, buff the party, and then use 5-star abilities. Yeah, 4 basic single attacks. Well, it's tri-elemental, so that's nice. But still, there's a Chain Viraga, there's a Chain Thundaga, and there's a Chain Blizzaga. And they're all 3 better than this. So, unless you're shipping those abilities off to other characters on the team, and he needs to use his commands, you're probably going to be using those over this command. Here's the nice part, really, is not only does he do a party buff, but he also gives himself Magic Bargain for 20 seconds with his command too. This is an excellent Burst Soul Break. Party buff, self buff, tri-elemental. Vivi's a very powerful mage. Yep, very good. I like it. I don't believe it's a plus elemental weapon. It is not. And next up we have Braska and the High Summoner's Long Staff, which in my opinion, if I remember correctly, is not a good burst. 8 random. Random is weird. You usually only want to see random attacks on soul breaks that apply something to enemies. The benefit to that is if it's a single target enemy, then random attacks means that you don't pay the area of effect tax. So the multiplier isn't decreased. It acts as a single target versus single target. But if there's more than one target, the random allows you to apply that effect, whether that be a stat debuff or an imperil, to more than one target. Seeing random on something that applies nothing is bad, because in area of effect fights, that just means that his damage is going to be unpredictable. And, you'd much prefer an area of effect attack in those fights. But at least during single target, 8 random doesn't mean anything at all. And that's the highest use case in the entire game. Most bosses are single target. So it's not as bad as I'm making it sound. It's dual elemental with fire and lightning. But the issue here, unlike Vivi's, who is kind of made for tri-elemental, Braska's really isn't, because instead of party buffing with his extra effect, Braska gives himself attached fire. So this is primarily, this really is just a fire soul break. So Braska's commands on the burst soul break are: grants Lingering Spirit to the user for 20 seconds. Lingering Spirit is a buff similar to Magic Bargain. It gives him plus 20 or 30% magic and minus 30% resistance. I would prefer Magic Bargain to Lingering Spirit if I can help it, because being a back row character is a mage, they can usually afford to lose the defense where they usually can't afford to lose the resistance. Lingering Spirit can be quite dangerous on mages. But that's not my issue. It's fine. Like, I'm just saying I prefer Magic Bargain. They're both good. The issue here is that this command doesn't deal any damage. That sucks. Like, even, you know, Papalymo with his Magic Bargain command is going to do 20,000 damage with it. That's not an insignificant chunk of damage. Braska, in order to self-buff himself, needs to waste an entire turn to do it. If he does that, what happens is he gets well, I suppose I'll talk about how these bursts work. You notice 4 commands here. When he grants himself Lingering Spirit, he also grants himself Summon a Frit. It's another status that only interacts with his burst. And if you have Summon a Frit active, the second version of the command becomes active. You see the S in parentheses here? So you'll be using a Frit to summon a Frit, and then the second version of the commands become active. If you don't summon a Frit, you don't choose to lose all that damage on that turn. His second command instead will just do 4 single attacks and 1.99 each. It's an awful burst command, as bad as Creel's. If you do choose to waste that turn, then you get Eternal Prayer summoning status, which does an extra attack at 1.99. If you can do your math, that adds up to 9.95, which is a much lower multiplier than Chain Faraga. So you waste a turn doing no damage to self-buff yourself, and then deal less damage than a 5-star ability. This is one of the worst. One of the worst bursts. I guess I didn't look at the summoning version of the first command. It's not as impressive as it sounds. Yeah, that's a 17.0, but what's wrong with it is that it removes the summon status. So you use the first command to deal no damage, and then you use the second command to do the 17, but you need to actually just cut that in half because you need to alternate them if you want to do that. So it's actually just an 8.5 group. It's powerful as a group attack, but really just nothing to write home about. It's nothing to be happy about at all. And the relic itself is a plus fire staff, I believe. Staff, yeah. So at least it has that going for it, but with the burst being as bad as it is, it's kind of like... And with fire mage weapons being a little more common, I would say ETA's has a lot more value than Braska's, because fire fist weapons are still, you know, worth something. This less so. Obviously, any day of the week would much prefer Papalymo's. Next up, we have Scott's Burst, which I don't think it's one I'm going to be able to, or I'm going to have to spend a lot of time on. Grants haste, attach fire, and burst mode to the user. Basic entry. Commands grant Spellblade 15% boost 3 to the user. Not good. The multiplier is 1.68. That's pathetic. That is basically half the multiplier of a 5-star Spellblade. Giving yourself Spellblade plus 15% doesn't get you there. And say you want to use a 5-star Spellblade with this. So you cast the burst, you use this ability, give yourself plus 15%. It doesn't make up for itself. It doesn't make up for how bad this command itself is. Over 3 attacks, mind you. It does a 1.68 to make it worth using this at all. Basically, this burst is just here for the Dark Bargain, which is exactly what like Magic Bargain, except for attack instead. So this is just a pretty bad burst. Pretty bad burst. Next up, Aces. Aces BSB is at least weird. At least there's something to talk about here. FFRK Rifle. 1804 grants physical blink 1 to all allies. Kind of important. It doesn't seem all that big. But there's 2 keys here, and that's instant cast. Instant cast soul breaks are powerful. Getting rid of this, like 2.5 seconds is such a long amount of time in a battle. Reducing that to instantaneous is so nice. So that's a nice benefit to this. And you'll notice that there's no attached fire here, which means Ace is probably going to do a little less damage with his BSB. His BSB isn't there for doing damage by itself, not alone. What Ace's BSB is for a very specific purpose, I think. This can be used as Ace's OSB until he gets his OSB. Because what OSBs are good at is dealing a lot of damage in a short amount of time. And that's exactly what Instacast Soul Breaks do. And the physical blink 1 to all allies, if you're really desperate, there is a 4-star Magicite that's going to be released at the end of January called Ixion. He's not weak to fire, but Ixion has a pretty annoying ability called Dispel, which I'm sure everyone has who has played this game for any amount of time has come to learn to dread. That removes Proteka, Shelga, Haste from all of your party members and stuff like regen. It sucks. It slows you down. It makes you susceptible to just straight up dying. But it's a physical attack, so forms of physical blink can basically just save you and just cheese the event, or cheese the battle. The problem with Ace and using this is that Ace doesn't have any way to generate Soul Break Gauge. He's a mage. I don't think I'm pretty damn sure he doesn't have Combat 4. He has Celerity, right? He has Celerity but no Combat. And no Wrath. So he can't, unless you're entrusting to him, he can't cast this often enough for it to matter. So I can't even consider that much of a benefit. I think Ace's BSB's big benefit is meant to be used with his USB. So, not really that big of a hit on the banner, I don't think, unless you already have his USB. And that concludes the Burst Soul Break section. We started out strong with Papalymo, ETA, and Refia, and end up with 4 elemental relics in the Burst Soul Break section. Still more than any other banner, at least. But it is a good Soul Break section, I think. I don't think there's any other banners. We'll find out. But it's going to be tough to lay claim to having 3 good bursts in Vivi, Refia, and Papalymo. 2 of which are elemental relics. Alright, so next up, the LMR section, which, in my opinion, is the best of the event. Locke's Arm Guard and Creel's Dress. Yes, Chain Affinity, there are. I'll let chat handle that, though, because that's a Nixion thing, not a festival thing. Creel's LMR grants Attach Fire at the beginning of the battle. If you notice, the chains don't grant Attach Fire, so Creel being able to start the battle with Attach Fire, and then, you know, using abilities, getting entrusted to, and then using her chain, which will do 80% increased damage. That's what the attach elemental statuses do. Attach X element is plus 50% damage with abilities, or plus 80% damage with soul breaks. So that's already a lot of extra damage. And what's really nice about Creel is that as a chain holder, that allows her to carry on that 50% extra damage over while she's in the chain, which is going to do a lot. So this is normally a good LMR for almost anybody, but specifically extremely good for Creel. So that's a really nice thing for this to appear on this banner. And next up we have Locke's LMR, which is, hey, it's familiar. Attach Fire at the beginning of battle. And Locke being a chain holder, exactly the same. And Locke has some other benefits. He has a BSB-1 that imperils. So it kind of works in a very similar way. Imperil is like the baby version of a chain, where you use it, you can carry Attach Fire into it if you would like to with his LMR, and it buffs, essentially buffs the party's elemental damage, just not as extremely. This LMR is actually extremely good for Locke. These LMR are very, very good. And if I remember correctly, both of them are plus fire armor as well. So that is, yeah, I don't think there's a single banner. Banner 4 does come close, but I'd have to call foul on Shantoto LMR because Shantoto does not exist on this banner. She is nowhere to be seen. It is a good LMR, but there's no Shantoto here. Locke and Creel are the 2 reasons you pull on this banner. They are the chain holders. There's no better banner synergy between the LMRs and the chains. So how do I feel about Banner 1 in total? Well, like I said at the beginning, it's honestly kind of easy to determine whether or not this is a good banner for you. Because it's completely solo or mono elemental. It's only fire. So if you're lacking in fire, then there aren't many other good sources to look for fire damage that are as good as this. The only one that I can think of is an event that's actually launching pretty soon. And we're going to go and take a look at it right now. The Greatest Hunt. The first banner of this event is another Locke shows his face again. But instead of Creel, we get Terra. And we get Terra's 2 headliner soul breaks, which is her USB and her OSB. I'm not going to go into them because it's not on the festival, but just know that together they are one of the most, they're basically the most powerful, tied for the most powerful fire magic, fire in the game. Shadow Dusk. This banner only has 3 6-stars because it's an event banner, negators. The banner format doesn't change to 4 6-stars until the week, not the week after. Yeah, the week after, when Onion Knight Rises, then we get 4 6-stars. This is the last one of the format, and it's worthy of note is that there's only 3 6-stars on this banner. Well, there's 4 6-stars on the first banner of the festival. Does it hurt this banner? I don't think so. Locke's USB is really good, and Terra's USB is really good, and Terra's OSB is really good. So yeah, it's only 3 6-stars, but they're all quality. Where on this banner, it's kind of a little different. You've got 3 6-stars that are quality, but there's something fishy going on here, and this is certainly fishy. So just because this one has more 6-stars doesn't necessarily mean, it's better. If you want my honest opinion, I think this banner is better. I know I just got done saying that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's better, but I think it is, because I think chains are just that powerful. This is a gacha game. And because it's a gacha game, it makes relics very difficult to get. They can be very costly to get. And that can cause you to run aground with some issues. Terra's USB by itself is very, very good. And that's fine. Terra's USB by itself is probably not as beneficial to a team as Creel's USB. Or Creel's CSB. It's only once you have Terra's OSB is that it just becomes, God or Goddess mode. But that's 2 relics. I think the point that I would make and why I believe that this is a better fire banner is that there's a lot of good fire stuff on this banner, more good fire stuff that's on this than that's on this banner. But the key is the 2 best relics only require you to have 1. So if you're looking for fire damage, specifically fire damage, I would say that this is a better bet. But because this is an event banner, it's not completely elementally focused. There are some other things going on here. Celeste BSB is good if you don't have access to a high runic. Mog's BSB is good if you don't have a Mage Heiska. This loses a lot of value because Mage Heiskas are much more common than they were when Mog's BSB first came out. So I wouldn't consider this to be a big hit and something worth going after, especially because in the event after is Onion Knight's USB 1, which is probably the best Mage Heiska in the game. This has super soul breaks on it. Not only does it have super soul breaks on it, but because of the way relics are distributed on a banner, it makes this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Relics are distributed and are given a probability for you to pull them by 14. Or divided by 14. So when you do a 100 gem, for instance, on a banner, any banner, you have a 14% chance of pulling a 5-star or better. And when you pull a 5-star or better, it has a percentage chance to pull one of these. The biggest issue with this banner, and why I couldn't suggest going after this over the first banner, is that this banner has super soul breaks on it, and each of them take up 2 of those slots. That is a problem, because both of these are basically worthless. They're good for submissions. It's just it's not a thing that you're looking to pull stuff for at this time in the game. This is a good banner. There's no doubting that this is a good banner. And just, if I'm aiming for fire stuff, and that's probably your aim if you're looking at this banner, I believe the first banner of the festival is better. 4% of that 14. Double everything else on the banner. Everything else takes us 1 slot. Those 2 super soul breaks at the bottom, which are near worthless, take up 4 by themselves. That is... Take it from me. Take it from me in my recent pulls. It's devastating. Don't be hit by that bug. It's deceptive when you look at the banner and say, because in your mind you weigh all of these equally, but you have to weigh these twice as... These are twice as likely to show up as anything else. It's painful. The burst soul breaks on this banner are better than the burst soul breaks on that banner. Papalimo, Refia, Vivi. It's just... And you can make a case that all 3 of the legend material on this banner are good, and they are. Lox we know is good, Terra's is good, and Celeste's is good. But the LMR on this banner are all good as well. So that's my assessment on that banner, and boy did I just talk a lot. What's everyone think? I know there was a lot of chat going on while I was doing that. I barely saw any of it, so. If anyone would like to re-ask questions, I will gladly answer them. ETA's BSB is awful. The relic is the only good thing about it. Papalimo, Refia, and Vivi are the stars of the burst soul break section. Do you know which is better for 4-star Magicite, Magic, or Physical? Probably be asking this for all the elements. That's probably something I should look at, Jimbo. Uh, 20,000 defense, 46,000 resistance, 28,000 defense, 49,000 resistance. That's a pretty big increase over Barrelith. While this is only a 3,000. They may be telling you to go magic here, but the abilities or the AI have a big role to play in that. It doesn't look like any of these are geared towards physical or magical. I would say, looking at Iskabine stats, that you're probably meant to be using mages. Oh, and he goes into long range mode. Yeah, right. I forgot about that. Yeah, magic. Though, remember, Fires Within is ranged, Ruby Spark is ranged, and those are the abilities that Locke and Refia use. So, don't forget that. Bards can use bows and thrown weapons. Is having literally just the chain for character good enough? Sabeth asks. Yes. They're that powerful. Even Locke, who among the realm of chains, is one of the weaker ones. Even Locke, just with his chain, is a fixture on your fire team. They are that powerful. Jowlin, yes, I would. Well, it depends on how you're running Terra. Terra firing out OSBs isn't exactly the best chain builder. But Terra mega quick casting meltdowns every turn and potentially dual casting them is. So I'd probably aim to run her like that. I mean, the difference there is why use Shulk with that team. Terra can Wrath, Locke can Life Siphon. You don't really, and neither of those characters really can do anything with their extra Soul Break. Terra just wants to be using Meltdowns. Locke just wants to be using Ruby Sparks. So throw in another fire character instead of Shulk. Have an extra character to add to the chain instead. Yes, just as with every festival, I'm expecting us to get a fair chunk of Mithril. Yeah. Okay, so I am gonna move on.